The acrid smell of burnt paper still clung to Fiona's fingertips as she dragged an old duffel bag from under her bed. 3:47 a.m. Her studio apartment sat drowning in darkness, only the neon glow of the strip bleeding through the blinds like a wound that wouldn't close. She moved like a ghost through her own life, pulling open drawers with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. $843. Everything she'd managed to scrape together from her shifts at the gallery, tips from tourists who thought her brown skin and bright smile made her exotic enough to photograph. She shoved the cash deep into her bag along with 3 changes of clothes, her passport, and the silver locket her grandmother had pressed into her palm the day she'd left Georgia. "For when you need to remember who you are," Grandma had said. Fiona had never opened it. She was too afraid of what she might find inside, or worse, what she wouldn't. Her phone glowed on the nightstand, Yang's face still frozen on the screen. That smile. The one he'd given the camera while his hand rested on that woman's waist. Fiona snatched it up and hurled it against the wall. Glass spider-webbed across the screen, his perfect face fracturing into 1,000 pieces. Good. Let him shatter the way he'd shattered her. She was zipping up the bag when her apartment door clicked open. Fiona's heart stopped. She hadn't heard footsteps, hadn't heard the lock turn, but there he stood in her doorway, not Yang, but someone almost worse. Kim. Yang's right hand, his shadow, his executioner when necessary. The man wore an expensive suit that looked wrong on someone so comfortable with violence. "Going somewhere, Fiona?" His voice was silk over steel, that soft Korean accent making every word sound like a threat, wrapped in courtesy. Her fingers tightened on the bag strap. "How did you get in here?" Kim smiled, and it was the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. "Yang owns this building. He's owned it since the day you signed your lease." He stepped inside, closing the door with a gentleness that felt obscene. "Did you really think you chose this apartment by chance? That the rent was so affordable because the landlord liked you?" The room tilted. Every breath became a battle. "He's been watching you." Kim moved closer, and Fiona noticed for the first time the small black device in his hand, a tablet, screen glowing with multiple camera feeds. Her living room, her bedroom, her bathroom. Months of her life displayed in neat little squares. From the beginning. Since the night you first smiled at him in that gallery. Since before you even knew his name. Fiona's stomach lurched. She thought of every private moment, every vulnerable second she'd spent in this apartment believing she was alone. Her hands moved instinctively to her stomach, protective of the secret she'd thought was still hers. Kim's gaze followed the gesture. His smile widened. "Ah, so you do know. That makes this easier." He pocketed the tablet. "There's a car waiting downstairs. You can walk or I can carry you. Either way, you're coming with me." "To where?" "To him." Kim tilted his head, studying her the way a scientist might study a specimen. "The dragon doesn't like it when his treasures try to run away, Fiona. And you." He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle like a noose. "You're carrying something far more valuable than you understand." The penthouse of the Aria Sky Suite didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a museum, beautiful, sterile, untouchable. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the Las Vegas Strip in all its neon glory, the city bleeding light into the pre-dawn darkness like an open wound. Fiona stood in the center of the massive living room, her small duffel bag still clutched in her white-knuckled grip, feeling like a stain on something too expensive to touch. Yang stood by the window, his back to her. Charcoal suit perfectly tailored, dark hair swept back, hands clasped behind him like a general surveying a battlefield he'd already won. He didn't turn when Kim deposited her inside. He didn't acknowledge her presence for a full minute that stretched into eternity. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled. More terrifying than any shout could ever be. "You were going to leave. Not a question, an accusation." Fiona's jaw tightened. "You got engaged. to someone else. While I was, her voice cracked. She hated herself for it. While I was carrying your child. Her name is Valentina Park. Yang turned then, and Fiona's breath caught despite everything. He was beautiful in the way dangerous things are beautiful, all sharp edges and controlled power, those dark eyes holding depths she'd once thought were tender. Now she saw them for what they were, calculating, ruthless, daughter of the Park crime family. Our engagement will unite two of the largest gambling operations in Nevada. Congratulations. The word tasted like poison. I hope you'll be very happy together. His expression didn't change. You misunderstand. He moved toward her with the fluid grace of a predator, each step measured, purposeful. This isn't about happiness, Fiona. This is about survival, legacy, power. And what am I? She forced herself to hold her ground even as every instinct screamed at her to run. What was I, Yang? Your little secret? Your break from reality? He stopped close enough that she could smell him. Sandalwood and rain and something darker, something that reminded her of smoke. His hand rose, one cold finger tracing the line of her jaw with a gentleness that felt like cruelty. You, he murmured, are the only real thing in my world. Fiona jerked away from his touch like it burned. Don't you dare try to make this romantic. You were planning a wedding while I was. Her hand moved to her stomach before she could stop it. His gaze followed the gesture. Something flickered in those obsidian eyes. Possession, hunger, something primitive and territorial that made her skin prickle with awareness. I know about the baby, Fiona. I've known since the moment the test results were logged into the hospital system 3 weeks ago. The world stopped spinning. 3 weeks? Her voice was barely a whisper. You knew for 3 weeks and you didn't. You just let me. I let you think you had a choice. Yang's voice dropped to that dangerous register that used to make her shiver for entirely different reasons. I let you think you could run, that you could decide whether or not to keep my heir, whether or not to stay in my life. He stepped closer, crowding her space until her back hit the cold glass of the window. But there was never a choice, Fiona. There was never an escape. You've been mine since the moment you walked into that gallery. The baby just makes it permanent. Fiona's knees buckled, not from fear. Though fear was certainly part of the cocktail of emotions flooding her system, but from the sheer weight of understanding. Yang caught her before she hit the ground, his arms wrapping around her waist, with a possessiveness that felt both protective and suffocating. Don't touch me, she gasped, trying to push him away. But her body betrayed her, swaying against his chest as the room spun. Kim. Yang's voice cut through the air like a blade. Get Dr. Huang! Now! Fiona barely registered Kim leaving. She was too focused on the way Yang had lowered them both to the floor, on her body cradled against his, as if she were something precious, rather than something trapped. His hand pressed against her forehead, checking for fever with a tenderness that felt like mockery after everything he'd just revealed. I feel sick, she whispered. I know. His thumb traced circles against her temple, that same gentle touch he'd used when they were together, when she'd thought he was just a successful businessman with a complicated past, rather than a monster wearing a man's face. It's the stress, the shock. You need to eat something. I need to get away from you. That's not going to happen. No anger in his tone, just certainty. As if her freedom was a debate that had already been settled in a courtroom she'd never been invited to. The penthouse door opened. A woman in an expensive pantsuit entered, medical bag in hand, on her expression professionally blank in a way that suggested she'd seen worse things than a pregnant woman on the verge of collapse. Mr. Yang, Dr. Huang. Yang shifted, lifting Fiona like she weighed nothing and carrying her to the massive sectional sofa. He set her down with care that felt pornographic in its gentleness, his hands lingering on her waist for a moment too long before he finally released her. Check her vitals. Make sure the baby is fine. Dr. Huang knelt beside the sofa, pulling out equipment with the efficiency of someone who'd done this countless times. She wrapped the blood pressure cuff around Fiona's arm without asking permission, her movements brisk but not unkind. "Mrs. Yang." "I'm not." Fiona's protest died when she saw the flicker of confusion on the doctor's face. "I apologize." Dr. Huang glanced at Yang, and then back to Fiona. "Ms. Carter, how are you feeling?" But the damage was done. The title hung in the air like a prophecy. "Mrs. Yang." Fiona's gaze snapped to Yang, who stood by the window again, watching the exchange with that same unreadable expression. "What did you do?" He didn't pretend not to understand. "I bought the maternal health wing of Henderson Medical Center the day your pregnancy test was processed." He said it like he was discussing the weather, like purchasing an entire hospital wing was a perfectly reasonable response to finding out his mistress was pregnant. "Dr. Huang is the head of obstetrics. She answers directly to me now. As do all the nurses, technicians, and staff who might come into contact with you or information about you. You can't just—" Fiona struggled to sit up. "But Doctor—" Huang's gentle hand on her shoulder kept her in place. "Please remain still," the doctor murmured, pressing the stethoscope against Fiona's chest. "Your heart rate is elevated. I need to make sure you're not in distress." "Of course I'm in distress," Fiona's voice cracked. "He's insane. He's completely protective." Yang interrupted, his voice cutting through her panic like a knife through silk. "I'm protective of what belongs to me. And you, Fiona, you and that child, belong to me in ways that go deeper than any legal document or marriage certificate." He moved away from the window, each step deliberate as he closed the distance between them. "I won't apologize for ensuring your safety, for making certain that no one, not my enemies, not my allies, not even you, can harm my heir." Dr. Huang finished her examination in tense silence, and her professional mask never slipping, even as the temperature in the room dropped to sub-zero. She packed up her equipment with careful precision, handed Fiona a bottle of prenatal vitamins that looked suspiciously pre-prepared, and excused herself with a bow that felt more like surrender than respect. The moment the door clicked shut, Fiona was on her feet. "I want to leave." "No, you can't keep me here." "I can." Yang poured himself a drink from the bar, whiskey neat, the amber liquid catching the early morning light streaming through the windows. "I own this tower. I employ the security. I control every entrance and exit. You're not leaving this penthouse until I know you're safe." "Safe from what?" Fiona's laugh was brittle, sharp enough to draw blood. "From you? Because right now, Yang, you're the biggest threat in my life." But he took a slow sip of his drink, his gaze never leaving hers. "The Park family has enemies. My engagement to Valentina has made those enemies bold. There are 3 rival syndicates who would love nothing more than to discover I have a weakness, a vulnerability." His eyes dropped to her stomach. "A child that isn't protected by the alliance that marriage would provide. Then let me go." Desperation colored her words. "Let me disappear. They'll never know about the baby. They'll never know about me. I'll vanish so completely that—" "You think I haven't already thought of that?" Yang set his glass down with controlled force, the crystal hitting marble with a sound like a gunshot. "You think that wasn't my first instinct? To hide you away somewhere remote, somewhere safe, where no one could ever find you?" Yeah, he crossed the space between them in 3 strides, his hands gripping her shoulders with the intensity that bordered on bruising. "But I can't. Because I've already made the mistake of caring about you, Fiona. And in my world, caring about someone is the same as painting a target on their back. The moment I try to hide you, someone will start looking. The moment I show weakness, someone will strike." Fiona stared up at him, seeing the truth written in every line of his face. This wasn't love. This was obsession, possession. The desperate clutching of a man who'd built an empire on violence, trying to hold on to the one gentle thing he'd ever touched. "I hate you," she whispered. "I know." His thumb brushed across her collarbone, the touch achingly familiar. "But you'll stay. Because despite what you think of me, you're smart enough to know that out there. He gestured toward the window, toward the glittering city beyond. Your prey. In here with me, you're untouchable. She wanted to argue, wanted to fight, but exhaustion crashed over her like a wave, and she found herself swaying on her feet again. Yang caught her, his arms wrapping around her waist with that same possessive gentleness that made her want to scream. I'll show you to your room, he murmured against her hair. You need to rest. I don't want... It's not a request. He guided her through the penthouse, down a hallway lined with abstract art that probably cost more than her entire life had been worth before she'd met him. The bedroom he showed her was massive king-sized bed with silk sheets, another wall of windows overlooking the strip, and a door that led to a bathroom larger than her old apartment. Fiona stood in the center of the room, her duffel bag still clutched like a lifeline, and tried not to think about how the door didn't have a lock on the inside. Yang lingered in the doorway, his expression unreadable. There are clothes in the closet, your size, your style, everything you might need. Of course there were, because he'd been planning this, preparing for it. How long? She asked quietly. How long have you been planning to cage me? His jaw tightened. Since the moment I realized I couldn't let you go. He started to leave, then paused, his hand on the doorframe. The engagement to Valentina is business, Fiona. Strategy, survival. But you, his voice dropped to something raw, something that sounded almost like pain. You're the only thing in my life that's mine. Not because of power or fear or obligation. Just mine. And I'll burn this entire city to the ground before I let anyone take you from me. He closed the door before she could respond. Fiona stood alone in her gilded prison, one hand pressed against the glass, watching the sun rise over a city that no longer felt like freedom. And despite everything, despite the fear and the anger and the absolute insanity of her situation, her other hand moved to her stomach, protective of the life growing inside her, a life that had just become the most dangerous thing she'd ever carried. Fiona didn't sleep. How could she, knowing Yang was somewhere in this penthouse, breathing the same air, existing in the same carefully controlled space? She lay on top of the silk sheets fully clothed, staring at the ceiling as dawn bled into morning, and then afternoon. Her hand never left her stomach, as if she could protect the tiny life inside through sheer will alone. Around 3 p.m., hunger finally drove her from the room. She opened the door expecting guards, locks, some physical manifestation of her imprisonment. Instead, she found only silence and the faint smell of coffee drifting from somewhere deeper in the penthouse. The living room was empty. So was the kitchen, though someone had left a covered plate on the marble island. Fiona lifted the lid to find perfectly prepared bibimbap, still warm, the egg yolk gleaming like a golden eye. Her favorite. Of course he knew. Yang knew everything. She was halfway through the meal, hating herself for how good it tasted when she heard it. A voice, low, controlled, and speaking rapid Korean from somewhere down the hall she hadn't yet explored. Yang's voice, but different, harder, colder, carrying an edge that made the hair on her arms stand up. Fiona set down her chopsticks. She should go back to her room, should pretend she hadn't heard anything. But something in that tone pulled her forward, curiosity and dread twisting together in her chest. The hallway was dim, lit only by the late afternoon sun filtering through distant windows. She followed the sound to a partially open door, her bare feet silent on the hardwood. Through the gap, she could see Yang's office, all dark wood and leather, screens mounted on the wall displaying security feeds and stock tickers. And Yang. Standing with his back to the door, phone pressed to his ear, in his free hand gripping the edge of his desk so hard his knuckles had gone white. I don't care about the timeline, he said in English now, his voice lethal. Move it up. The wedding happens in 3 days, not 3 weeks. Fiona's heart stopped. Valentina's father is getting suspicious. If we wait any longer, he'll realize the engagement is... Yang paused, listening. No. The Park family doesn't know about Fiona. No one knows. And it needs to stay that way until after the ceremony. Another pause. Because the moment I marry into that family, they become the target. Every enemy I've made, every rival syndicate looking for weakness, they'll all focus on Valentina, on her family, on everything except the woman actually carrying my child. The phone slipped from Fiona's hand. It hit the floor with a crack that shattered the silence like a gunshot. Yang spun around. Their eyes met through the gap in the door, his dark and unreadable, hers wide with dawning horror. He ended the call without breaking eye contact. "Come in, Fiona. Not a request. Never a request with him." She pushed the door open, her legs moving on autopilot even as her mind screamed at her to run. Yang watched her enter, his expression carved from stone, giving nothing away. "You're marrying her to make her the target," Fiona whispered. "You're using your engagement as bait. I'm using my engagement as a shield." Yang moved around the desk with that predatory grace, each step measured, deliberate. "For you. For our child. Valentina Park is a soldier's daughter. She understands the game. She knows what she's signing up for. Does she know you're using her to die in my place?" Something flickered across Yang's face. Guilt, maybe, or the ghost of whatever conscience he'd buried to survive in his world. "She knows the marriage is strategic. That I don't love her. That's all she needs to know." Fiona backed up until her spine hit the wall. "You're insane. You can't just... People aren't chess pieces, Yang. You can't move them around your board and expect them not to bleed. I've been moving pieces on this board since I was 16 years old." He caged her against the wall, his arms bracketing her shoulders, his body a wall of heat and controlled violence. "I know exactly how much blood each move costs. And I've decided that Valentina's risk is worth your safety. That's not insane. That's survival. That's monstrous. Yes. No denial. No apology. Just brutal honesty delivered in a voice that sounded almost tender. "I am a monster, Fiona. I thought you understood that the night you met me. The night you looked at me in that gallery and saw something worth saving." His hand rose, fingers tracing the curve of her jaw with devastating gentleness. "But there's nothing to save. There never was. There's only this, a monster trying to protect the one pure thing he's ever touched, even if it means becoming more monstrous in the process." Fiona's breath hitched. She hated how her body responded to his proximity, how some treacherous part of her leaned into his touch, even as her mind recoiled. "I won't let you do this. I won't let you sacrifice someone else for me. You don't have a choice." His thumb brushed across her lower lip, the touch electric, dangerous. "Neither of us do. At the moment you decided to keep this baby, you bound yourself to me, to my world, to my wars. And in war, Fiona, there are always casualties." She shoved him hard, her palms flat against his chest, putting every ounce of strength she had into pushing him away. Yang let her, stepping back with that infuriating calm, watching her with eyes that saw too much. "I hate you," she spat, the words sharp as broken glass. "I hate everything about you. The way you manipulate, the way you control, the way you think you can just decide who lives and who dies based on what's convenient for your empire." "I know." He straightened his cuffs, the gesture so casual it felt obscene. "But your hatred doesn't change reality. The wedding happens in 3 days. Valentina becomes my wife in the eyes of the law and the underworld. And you," his gaze dropped to her stomach, "you stay here, safe, hidden, mine. Show me." The words escaped before Fiona could stop them. "What?" "The ring." She pushed off the wall, closing the distance between them with a recklessness born of desperation. "The engagement ring you gave her. The one from the news. Show it to me." Yang's expression flickered. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. Not the ring, the box it came in. He opened it to reveal a massive diamond solitaire, the stone so large it looked fake, sitting in a bed of black velvet like a star that had fallen to earth and died. Fiona stared at it. This was the ring that had destroyed her world. the symbol of Yang choosing someone else, something else, over what they'd had together. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Then she looked up at him, tears burning in her eyes. "Is that supposed to make me feel better? That you bought her something beautiful while you locked me in a cage? Look closer." Yang lifted the ring from the box, holding it up to the light. "What do you see?" "A diamond." "Look, closer." Fiona squinted. There, embedded in the band so small she almost missed it, a tiny blinking red light. Her breath caught. "What is that?" "GPS tracker, heart rate monitor, audio transmitter." Yang's voice was clinical, detached, like he was describing a weapon rather than a piece of jewelry. "The moment Valentina puts this ring on, I'll know where she is every second of every day. I'll hear every conversation she has. I'll know if her heart rate spikes, if she's in danger, if someone so much as looks at her wrong." An understanding crashed over Fiona like ice water. "You're tracking her." "I'm tracking everyone who gets close to her." Yang returned the ring to its box with careful precision. Her father, her brothers, every member of the Park Syndicate who thinks this marriage gives them access to my empire. The ring is a listening device, Fiona. A weapon disguised as a promise. He closed the box with a soft click. "And in 3 days, when I slide this onto Valentina's finger in front of the entire Vegas underworld, every enemy I've ever made will focus all their attention on her, on what she represents, on the alliance they think I'm trying to build, while I'm here, hidden, with your real heir. Now you're beginning to understand." Yang set the box back in the drawer, his movements precise, controlled. "Valentina isn't a victim. She's a decoy. And she knows it. This marriage buys her father's syndicate protection from rivals, and it buys me time to secure your safety before anyone realizes you exist." Fiona's legs gave out. She sank into the leather chair behind her, her mind racing. "This is insane. All of this is completely insane." "Welcome to my world." Yang poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal pitcher, handed her one. "Drink. You're pale." She took the glass on autopilot, the cool water doing nothing to ease the burning in her throat. "What happens after the wedding? When your enemies realize Valentina isn't actually important to you? When they figure out the marriage is fake? By then, you and the baby will be untouchable." Yang leaned against his desk, arms crossed, every inch the calculating crime lord. "I'll have restructured my assets." He liquidated the illegal operations, built legitimate fronts that can't be touched by rivals or law enforcement. The Dragon of the Strip will retire, and in his place will be a respectable businessman with a wife everyone thinks is his priority. And me? What do I become in this fantasy? His eyes met hers, dark and infinite and terrifyingly sincere. "You become free, to live, to raise our child, to hate me from a safe distance if that's what you choose. But alive, Fiona. Always alive." The wedding happened exactly as Yang promised. Fiona watched it on the penthouse's massive TV screen, forced to witness the man she'd once loved slide that GPS-encoded shackle onto another woman's finger. Valentina was stunning in white lace and diamonds, her smile perfect and empty. Yang looked like what he was, a predator in a tailored suit, playing the role of devoted groom while his eyes scanned the crowd for threats. The ceremony was beautiful. The lie was flawless. Fiona turned off the TV before the kiss and locked herself in the bathroom. She sat on the cold tile floor, her back against the tub, and finally let herself break. The sobs came hard and ugly, the kind of crying that left her gasping for air, her chest aching with the weight of everything she'd lost. Her freedom, her innocence, her belief that love could exist separate from violence and manipulation. She didn't hear Yang return to the penthouse, didn't hear him call her name, his voice edged with concern when she didn't answer. She only realized he was there when she heard him on the other side of the bathroom door, his knuckles rapping gently against the wood. Fiona, soft, almost tender. "Open the door." "Go away." Her voice was wrecked, raw, Go back to your bride. Silence. Then the sound of something sliding down the door, Yang's body, she realized, as his voice came from much lower, as if he'd collapsed onto the floor on the other side. She's not my bride, not in any way that matters. You married her. I signed a contract. A pause. There's a difference. Fiona pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to stop the tears. Why are you here? Shouldn't you be at your reception, celebrating your strategic victory? The reception is a performance. I can't. His voice cracked, and the sound of Yang's control fracturing was somehow more terrifying than anything else he'd done. I can't be there knowing you're here, alone, hurting. I'm always going to be hurting. The truth tasted like ash. Because of you, because of what you've turned me into. I know. Something scraped against the door, his hand maybe, pressed flat against the wood as if he could touch her through the barrier. I know what I've done to you, what I'm still doing. But Fiona, his breath hitched, and when he spoke again, his voice was thick with something that sounded almost like tears. I would do it all again, every manipulation, every lie, every monstrous thing. Because you're alive, and that's all that matters to me. Fiona stared at the door, her heart a war zone. That's not love, Yang. That's obsession. I know. A sound like a sob, quickly stifled. But it's all I have. Silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they couldn't say. Then something slid under the door, small, metallic, catching the bathroom light. Fiona crawled forward, her hands shaking as she picked it up. A ring. And not the massive diamond from the news. This was simple gold, slightly tarnished, the kind of ring someone bought when they had more hope than money. The inside was engraved with tiny, careful letters. For when I find her. I bought that 3 years ago. Yang's voice came through the door, barely above a whisper. When I was nobody. When I was still human enough to believe in things like fate and second chances. I saw it in a pawn shop window and I thought... He broke off, collecting himself. I thought someday I'd meet someone who made me want to be more than the dragon. Someone worth becoming human for. Fiona's fingers closed around the ring, the metal warm from his touch. And then you met me. And then I met you. His voice was raw, stripped of every defense, and I realized I was too far gone, too stained, and too monstrous to ever deserve the kind of love that ring represented. But I kept it anyway, because some stupid human part of me still hoped that maybe, just maybe, you could love the man I was before I became the monster I am. Tears streamed down Fiona's face, hot and unstoppable. She pressed the ring against her chest, feeling its weight, its promise, its impossibility. I can't love you, she whispered. I know. I hate what you've done. What you're still doing, I know. But I'm carrying your child. And that baby, her voice broke. That baby deserves better than a monster for a father. Yes. Yang's voice was barely audible. Which is why I've already started the process. Liquidating the illegal operations, turning evidence against my own board, creating a clean identity that can't be touched by my past. A shuddering breath. I'm burning the dragon so the man can survive. For you. For our child. Even if you never forgive me. 6 months later, Fiona stood on the balcony of a different penthouse in a different city, watching the sun set over San Francisco Bay. The Vegas neon felt like a lifetime ago, like something that had happened to someone else. Her hand rested on her swollen belly, feeling the baby kick with the strong, insistent rhythm of life demanding to be lived. Behind her, through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see Yang in the kitchen. He moved with careful precision, chopping vegetables for the dinner he insisted on cooking himself. No staff, no guards. Just a man trying to pretend he'd never been a monster, even though they both knew the truth. The transformation had been brutal. Yang had testified against his entire criminal network and dismantling the empire he'd spent 15 years building. The Park family had called for his blood when they discovered the GPS ring's true purpose. But Valentina, cold, calculating Valentina, had negotiated a truce. The annulment was finalized within weeks. The marriage revealed as the strategic farce it had always been. The dragon of the strip was dead, burned alive by his own calculated sacrifice. What remained was just Yang, CEO of a legitimate tech security firm, father-to-be, man with haunted eyes who still woke up screaming some nights, his past clawing at him even in sleep. Fiona hadn't forgiven him. She'd told him that from the beginning, made it crystal clear that forgiveness wasn't something she could offer. But she'd agreed to try, to let him be present for their child, to exist in this strange, a complicated space between hatred and understanding. Dinner's ready. Yang appeared in the doorway, wiping his hands on a towel. He looked different without the tailored suits and the weight of an empire on his shoulders. Younger, somehow. More human. "Are you hungry?" Fiona turned, the setting sun painting her brown skin gold, her natural hair framing her face in a cloud of curls she'd stopped straightening months ago. "I'm always hungry lately. Your kid is demanding." The corner of Yang's mouth twitched, the closest he came to smiling these days, like his mother. Her mother. Fiona patted her belly. "I'm convinced it's a girl. Then she'll be brilliant and ruthless and absolutely terrifying." Yang held out his hand, not presuming to touch, just offering. "Just like you." Fiona stared at his hand for a long moment. And the same hand that had trapped her, controlled her, dismantled lives like chess pieces on a board, but also the hand that had held her hair back when morning sickness hit, that assembled furniture for the nursery with painstaking care, that trembled when feeling the baby kick for the first time, as if he couldn't believe something so pure could come from something so damaged. She took his hand. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe never. But a beginning. They walked inside together as his phone rang on the counter. Unknown international number. Yang glanced at the screen, his expression hardening for just a moment. A flash of the dragon breaking through the careful facade. Then he picked up the phone, walked to the balcony, and dropped it over the edge. They watched it fall 40 stories, disappearing into the San Francisco dusk like a star burning out. "That was dramatic," Fiona murmured. "That was necessary." Yang's hand settled over hers, both of them resting on her belly, protecting the life they'd created from the shadows of his past. "Some ghosts need to stay buried." Fiona leaned back against his chest, feeling his heartbeat against her spine, steady, human, alive. She thought about the ultrasound she'd burned 6 months ago, the ashes of a future she'd thought was destroyed. And she thought about the new ultrasound in her wallet, the one showing a healthy baby girl with strong lungs and her father's stubborn heartbeat. Same child, different future. Yang? Her voice was soft, barely audible over the wind. "Yes? If you ever lie to me again, if you ever manipulate or control or play God with people's lives, I will take our daughter and disappear so completely even you won't find us." His arms tightened around her, protective and possessive and just a little bit terrified. "I know. Good." She tilted her head back, meeting his eyes. "As long as we understand each other." He pressed his lips to her temple, the kiss gentle, reverent, the touch of a man worshipping something he knew he didn't deserve. "I understand perfectly." The sun finished setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold and promise. Somewhere in the city below, Yang's past was hunting for him, searching for the dragon that no longer existed. But up here, in this moment, there was only them. A monster trying to be a man, a woman trying to forgive, and the tiny heartbeat between them demanding they both be better than their worst selves. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, and it was barely an ending at all, but it was honest, real. The messy, complicated truth of what happens when darkness touches light, and neither one emerges unchanged. Fiona's hand found the simple gold ring on her finger, not the GPS-encoded diamond, but the tarnished band from a pawn shop, the one Yang had bought when he still believed in redemption. She twisted it absently, feeling its weight, its promise, its burden. and for the first time since she'd burned that ultrasound in a Las Vegas studio, she let herself hope. If you made it this far, you're part of something special. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to know where this story found you. Hit that subscribe button because part 2 is coming, and trust me, Yang's past isn't done hunting them yet. Should Fiona forgive him completely? Or does the dragon have more demons to face? Let me know what you think. This is just the beginning.